So our goal for this lesson is to learn more about constraints and some of the different options and get comfortable with those and making a lot of changes to a sketch. So we're going to start out with this sketch for this pocket tool that has some scissors and a can opener. Our sketch is not going to start out as good as this. We're going to make a lot of changes to it to get it to be the correct shape. So the first step is to go into Fusion, open up the data panel and open up the pocket knife. And then we're going to come up to File and Save As, because we can't change their part. So we'll put that in the Fusion tutorials. And so notice this is pretty different. This is too wide. Some things are different shapes here. This looks kind of crazy, but that's okay. When you start sketching, you can just kind of put a rough sketch out there and then start adding some rules to make it exactly the way that you want it to be. So the first thing that we're going to do is fix these two ends to the rectangular part in the middle. It turns out that this one is a little more challenging if this one isn't done first. So I would recommend doing this one first. What we're going to do is modify the sketch that we have here. And one of the constraint tools that we have is a midpoint constraint. So we're going to choose midpoint and we want to we'll click on the center of this circle. We want it to be on the center of that line. And there we go. That kind of makes sure that this goes smoothly around this side. All right. We could do that on the other side, or we could use a different rule. We're going to use the tangent rule on the other side, and we're going to say we want this curve to be tangent to the line on the top. So now we have those two the same size. Notice what happens if I click on those two in the opposite order. If I click tangent on the line and then the circle, it does the exact same thing. It really doesn't matter which way we select those. All right. And then we're going to start adding some dimensions for some sizes. So D for dimension, I want the radius of the curve to be 3 millimeters. So it didn't matter how big it was before, I just told it to be 3. And then I want the length of the rectangle to be 60. So we'll click here, click between those, 60. Now my pocket tool is the correct length and the correct width. And now we're going to add some other constraints to these two things. So first we're going to add the blade profile. We're going to add a symmetric and an equal and then a coincident. Um, so let's see if we pull up our scissor blades. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is add the radius. That's a dimension. So we'll tell this to be 7 millimeters. And we're going to add a symmetric between these two, between the flat edges of the scissor blade. So symmetric is under constraints here. We want this line on the top and this line on the bottom to be symmetric about this center line. So that'll keep those the same distance apart from each other. And let's see if this will work. If we start dragging on this, it'll try to change everything, but it'll keep those two lines exactly the same distance away from the center line. Now, I don't like what I just did there, so I'm going to undo it. But you can see how it moved things to be the same on both sides, right? Let's see, we want an equal constraint on the bottom of the scissor blade profile and the left of the rectangular bottom. So we want this curve and this curve to be the same. So we'll do equal, make those two the same radius, right? We could have put in a dimension and made it the same as this 3 over here. But later, if we decide we want that to be bigger, we want this one to grow also. So it's better to use an equal constraint on them. And then we want to do a coincident between the center of these two circles. So coincident is right here. And so we'll make coincident between that point and that point, and it puts them in the correct location. All right. And now we're going to add a few more, let's see, we're going to add a few more things to the scissor blade profile, and we're going to add a dimension onto it to make it the exact right shape. So I already did the 7. Um, we want to move these things a little bit slightly different shape here. So drag the tip of the left blade to move the scissor closer to the pocket knife body. So we're going to hit escape, make sure we're not in any commands, and then we'll try dragging this a little closer. And there we go. Sometimes that's a little cranky about moving, but there we go. And then we dimension that to be 7. Looks pretty good. We'll keep going. This time we're going to make some modifications to the can opener blade. So we're first going to add the perpendicular constraints to the bottom edge on the left and the straight line connecting to it on the right. So that might be a little confusing. They're talking about this corner right here. So we'll do perpendicular between this line and that line. That squares up that part here. And then the top inside, inside the gap in the line connecting to it on the left. So that's this one that they're talking about. So right here and here, that squares that up. That looks a lot better. And then we've got a couple more. We're going to add a collinear, right? So collinear means we're going to make these two lines, this one and this one, make it so that one goes straight into the other. So collinear is this symbol. We want this line and this line to be along the same line, just with a gap between them. We want a concentric between this circle and this circle. On the other side, we did it with a coincident. We can also, since they're circles, we can do concentric. So we'll click on the circle here, the circle there. That moves those to the same. And then those same two arcs, we want them to be the same diameter. So equal between these two. And that shape looks a lot better. So they want us to check to make sure that all these arcs are the same, that the coincident and concentric connected things correctly, and that they can move towards the body. So if we take this one, if we start dragging on these parts, does it move in or, let's see, I'm still in the equal constraint. Escape a few times, and then we can click on one line and drag it in and out. And you can see that the part stays the same shape as we drag it back and forth. So I'll save and ready to move on to the next part.